I had already mentioned to Melissa last night after the meeting, I didn't want to correct anything, but I said it might be a very good idea, hey, to have like Georgia Main Street, GMA, somebody come and do like a workshop meeting with them to kind of understand because they don't.
I think that we need to ask.
I think that would be over DDA's head if they're going to get into more zoning practices. Main Street doesn't need Main Street doesn't. Main Street needs to just be a committee
Yeah, they need to.
because it's DDA needs some training. Probably because they've been Sleepy Town for a long time, and then they got like
Nothing there.
yeah, Doug's.
Does.
That's it. Yeah.
He said there were only 1,400
Yeah.
1,400 people that live there.
Oh yeah.
And now they're doubling that. Plus, because we'll have 2,000 people coming to for their events.
Yeah, Ackworth used
And
to
we
get all that
haven't,
overflow.
so, just thought I would help.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Don't say that.
Mine's just in there for next Tuesday.
Yeah, there's just like
Okay.
yeah,
Wednesday.
Is that the day I'm trying?
Wednesday, all I have is a 10, and that's it. Thursday,
Okay.
I'm booked until 4. You
Okay.
said 3:15.
Okay.
I didn't know.
And
if
both
that
of those are on there? Okay. I read it really quick.
was fair.
Heard from Matthew.
Oh yeah, we saw him.
He's here.
He should be here. We saw him. He was in finance committee this morning. So Anna's the one.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and begin our work session. First item we have on the agenda is the FY24 audit presentation by Malden and Jenkins, CPAs and advisors.
Good morning. My name is Meredith Lipson. I am an audit partner with the firm of Malden and Jenkins, and we handle your annual financial statement audit. Also here with me today is Ryan Jones. He's a director with Malden and Jenkins and heavily involved in the audit process as well. I believe you all have been given hard copies of what's up here on the screen. We refer to as our auditor's discussion and analysis. And included within this document, which is fairly thick, I guess you could say, is a lot of information that we as auditors are required to communicate to you all under the standards that guide us. And I'm certainly not going to read through all of this. I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights for you guys because I know you have a lot going on as well. So if we could go to page 5. One more, I believe. Yes. So the independent auditor's report is the first item that you will see in your annual comprehensive financial report, which, by the way, has been completed. The financial statements have been completed. They're in process right now. But since we've already issued our opinion, we thought we'd go ahead and present the audit the audit findings to you guys. And then that hard copy will be sent to Jennifer not too much longer. Again, it's in processing. But as far as our independent audit report, as you can see on page 5, the financial statements are the responsibility of management, and our responsibility is to provide an opinion based on our audit procedures. We did issue an unmodified, clean opinion. That's the opinion, of course, that you want to receive. If you'll turn to page 6, the city prepares what's known as an annual comprehensive financial report, and it goes above and beyond what's required by the state of Georgia Department of Audits. It includes various information outside of just your audited financial statements. As you can see on page 6, there's an introductory section, has a letter of transmittal, organizational chart, directory of officials, and the certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. This certificate is given, it's good for 1 year. It's given for those recipients that are part of the GFOA Certificate of Achievement program. So each year the city submits your annual comprehensive financial report to the Government Finance Officers Association, and they review it for making sure it has all of the information that's required and be included in there. And if so, they award you all the Certificate of Achievement. And you all have received that certificate for a number of years. We certainly anticipate that your fiscal year 24 audit will also receive the certificate, but the 23 certificate is included within your 24 audited financial statements, so you'll see that. The financial section is, I guess, the meat of the comprehensive financial report. It includes our audit report, an MD&A, management discussion analysis, and the financial statements and footnotes. I do encourage you all, once you receive your financial report, if you don't look at anything else, look at the management discussion and analysis. It follows our audit report. It's written by management, not by us. We do make sure that the information is consistent with the financial statements themselves, but it's a really good overview of the financial activity of the city for the fiscal year. Again, written by management. Jennifer does a great job with that, and it really gives you a good understanding of the financial operations of the city for that fiscal year. Finally, after the financial section is your statistical section, which includes 10-year trend analysis, all different kinds of information related to financial trends, revenue trends, debt, and any of operating information as well. So again, your annual comprehensive financial report includes a lot of additional activity, and you all should be really proud to have that as your financial document. If you'll turn to page 8, we've provided here at the bottom under that section, government-wide full accrual financial statements, a little bit of information as far as looking at the city government as a whole, all of your operations, both governmental and proprietary enterprise type. Total assets for the government as a whole approximated $156 million, offset by liabilities of approximately $62.9 million, resulting in net position or equity of about $93.1 million as of September 30th, 2024. The following page, at the very top, we talk about the statement of activities, which once again, is looking at your financial statements as a whole, all of your funds together. You all had a change in net position, or an increase in your net position of approximately $6.1 million for fiscal year 24.
Could you tell me what the $3 million with the other taxes are?
Tell me where you're looking.
I'm looking at the chart down below. It's got 2.9.
Oh, the chart at the bottom?
Yeah.
Page 9? Okay, so this is your general fund revenues that we developed a pie chart here that showed the revenues by type. The largest two revenues, the $6.7 million and the $4.7 million, are property and sales taxes. The other taxes of $3 million That includes, help me out, Ryan, Jennifer. That's right. Insurance premium tax, TAVT taxes.
That's the other taxes.
Yes, yes, sir. But your two largest general fund revenues, the property taxes and the sales taxes, that's very normal for city government, actually for city and county government. Pretty much the largest sources of revenues are almost always your property and sales taxes. On page 10 is a chart reflecting expenditures by function. As you can see, your public safety expenditures are approximately $6.68 million, is the largest expenditure function, and that's also 99.9% of the governments we work with. Public safety is the largest expenditure, but it's followed by public works and your general government administrative type functions after that. On page 11, we have a 5-year trend history of your revenues and transfers in compared to your expenditures and transfers out. As you can see, for September 30, 2024 year end, your revenues and expenditures almost equaled. It's about as close as I've ever seen. I believe you all had, if you look on the following page, you can see for 2024 you had a net increase in your fund balance or revenues in excess of expenditures of $7,864, which is, as I said, pretty close to break even as I've ever seen. But on page 12, it does give you a trend, a history of the changes in your fund balance each year. For 2023, it was a much larger increase in your fund balance of $1.1 million. Some of the I guess variances from the prior year that resulted in such a smaller increase, where there was some increases in good bit of increase in your public safety and public works expenditures in fiscal year 24, as well as a large increase in transfers out. There was a $1.4 million increase in transfers to other funds, and that was to the Public Facilities Authority Fund for bond payments. Are any questions about that?
Just real quick. 22 related to the COVID funds coming in, or was that too late? Did they come in earlier than that?
The COVID funds, well, they came in kind of in different years.
Okay.
2021, 22. It was different
Okay.
timing because they came in two different, I guess,
Because I know
tranches.
that made a difference in the revenue and everything. Okay.
Correct. The next page, page 13, this graph is also a 5-year trend history of your expenditures compared to your fund balance. Total expenditures for fiscal year 24 were $18.56 million. Your fund balance was approximately $10.9 million. The further apart these two lines are, or I guess the wider the gap between the expenditures and the fund balance, the less leverage that the city has going into its new fiscal year. So at September 30, 2024, you all had approximately 214 days worth of expenditures, or 7 to 8 months worth of expenditures to go into your new fiscal year, which is it's a pretty strong fund balance. There's no, I guess, perfect fund balance for everyone. It really depends on the government and the activities that you have going on. If you're a small rural city with not much happening, you can afford to have a much lower fund balance. If you are a city that's got, a lot of capital projects going on, things that you all are doing, you're a growing community, you'll need to have a larger fund balance. And 7 to 8 months in your fund balance is pretty strong, and I know you all have a lot going on, so that's going to carry you on through to those months when you start collecting property taxes, your larger sources of revenues. So a good fund balance at September 30, 2024. The next couple of pages just give you some additional information about some of the other funds of the city. You all have special revenue funds and capital project funds that are where any of the revenues coming into those funds are restricted for particular purposes, like your special purpose sales tax funds. That's restricted for capital projects. You also have business type funds. You have a water and sewer fund, a solid waste fund, and a stormwater fund. And on page 14 and into page 15 gives you some information regarding the activities of those funds for fiscal year 24. All three of those funds had net income, so a positive net income, positive increase in the net position for those funds. As well as on page 15, we talk about the statement of cash flows for each of those activities. The city has very good cash flows from its operations, which with these enterprise type funds, water, sewer, solid waste, you want to make sure that the charges for those services to the citizens are covering the costs. And so when you see that you've got positive cash operations from cash flows, that means that the charges for services are covering the costs of those services. Which is not always the case with some of the cities we work with, especially in the solid waste situation. But you all seem to have that, under control, where the charges for the services are covering those costs. Page 16 and on to page 17. This discusses the various footnotes to your financial statements. There's no significant changes in the footnotes, but just remember all the information, and it's quite a lot that's included within here, really gives you more information about the balances and the numbers that you see on the financial statements themselves. It talks about your deposits and investments and capital assets and any debt that the city has. So it does give you a good bit of additional information that's always important to understand. On the bottom of page 17, we talk about the compliance report that we issue. We refer to it as a Yellow Book report, but it's a report on our tests of the city's internal controls and compliance with laws and regulations. We don't give an opinion on that, but we do provide a form of negative assurance as to the city's internal controls and compliance. Had we had any findings or any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, those would have been reported within this compliance report. However, we had no findings, no material weaknesses or anything of that nature that were required to be reported. So that's always a good thing. Page 18 and over to the next few pages. This is information that we as auditors are required to communicate to you all under the standards that guide us. I won't go through all of these, but just kind of hit the highlights. On page 18, we talk about accounting policies. Just to make sure you all understand, management has the ultimate responsibility for the selection and use of the accounting policies for the city. On page 19, we talk about the fact that there are certain estimates that are an integral part of the preparation of the financial statements, and they're based on management's current judgment. We do consider those estimates and management's judgments during our audit process and make sure that we agree with those estimates, and we had no issues with that. The footnote disclosures, as I mentioned, of the financial statements are a very important part of the financial statements themselves. It goes on to talk about we had no difficulties as part of the audit process, no disagreements with management, and again, these are things that we are required to communicate to you all. On page 20, we talk about audit adjustments. We had no audit adjustments that came up as part of the audit process, which hats off to your finance department, Jennifer and Amanda and their staff. They do an excellent job. You all are so very fortunate. The only adjustment we had related to the net pension obligation, and that's all because we wait on that information from outside actuaries to be able to record that. So great job. We did have 2 adjustments that we passed on due to the immateriality of them. One related to a lease that qualified as a lease under GASB 87. The amount was so immaterial that we didn't feel it warranted recording it, as it really would have no effect on the financial statements themselves. The other was a reduction in the gain on disposal of capital assets. In a previous year, the accumulated depreciation had gotten off track, and 1 year's worth of accumulated depreciation was omitted from the when an asset was transferred from the governmental capital assets to the business type capital assets, and rather than recording it as a prior period adjustment, we just ran that amount because of the dollar amount of it was not significant. We ran that amount through the current year. And just always to know, we are independent of the city and any related organizations. Page 21 through 27, these pages give you information on some of the new standards that the Governmental Accounting Standards Board has implemented, and they will be effective in the future years. I certainly, it's a lot of information. I certainly won't bore you with all of these, but just so that you all know and aware of the standards that are out there on the horizons to be implemented. On page 27, we just give you a little bit more information about some of the things that our firm offers. And we do offer all of our clients free quarterly continuing education, so you do receive CPE credits for any of these quarterly classes that we do. They're all done through webinars. I think you all participated in some of those, and certainly if any of you all are interested in participating, just let us know. We'd love to put your email down and have you all be provided with the information to tune into those as well. On page, let's see, on page 30, we provide some information about some of the advisory services that we offer. We have a whole separate division within Malden and Jenkins for advisory services that there's all kinds of projects, implementation studies, things of that nature that we know governments seem to need, and so we have a separate division that handles that. If there's ever any projects that you feel like you all might need, they do a lot of operational assessments and things of that nature. Just let us know. We'll get you in touch with that group. We also have an IT group as well that
Could you give us an example of what you're talking about, projects that you could assist us with?
Sure.
Not sure I totally got what you were saying there.
Okay, yeah. And actually, we have some of those listed that we've done for other governments on page 31. We've done operational and performance assessments, various feasibility studies, and functional assessments in finance departments. We've done technology and utilization assessments. There's quite a wide variety of things that this group has been engaged to do in governments all over the country.
Okay, and I can go. We've actually got examples right when we go to the other page, so I'll read through those. Thank
Okay,
you, I appreciate
sure. And
it.
again,
though.
if you have any questions or if there's something you're interested in to see if we can do, just let us know. Just let us know. We'd be glad to talk to you about it. And as I mentioned, we also have a separate department, an IT department that handles any kind of IT attestation type engagements. We've done cybersecurity framework engagements. Cybersecurity is a big thing now. Also, system vulnerability assessments. I am not an IT person at all, so it'd be very difficult for me to explain these in greater detail. But there is information included in here, and again, we can certainly get you all in touch with this IT department that we have if there's ever any need for or interest in discussing possible ways we can help you. That's really the end of my presentation. Again, I skipped over a lot of the information that's included in here because there's a lot. Just kind of hit the highlights. But if you have any questions, I'm glad to address those. And we just very much appreciate the opportunity to work with the city. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And just want to thank your finance department. They do an excellent job. There's a lot to get prepared for us. And we know they have other things to do as well. So just want to thank you all very much for that.
Thank you.
Sure.
We're going to move to item A2, intergovernmental agreement with Douglas County and Douglas County Tax Commissioner, Ms. Hallman.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is an intergovernmental agreement with Douglas County and the Douglas County Tax Commissioner's Office. As you know, both Carroll and Douglas do the billing and collection for our property taxes. And this IGA is up for renewal on the Douglas County side. I don't believe the Carroll County one is up for renewal for a couple of more years. Nothing has changed. We pay $2 per parcel to the county and $2 per parcel to the tax commissioner. And this is a renewal agreement for the same rate per parcel.
In a nutshell, we contract with them to do
Yep.
the tax collection on the Douglas County side.
Correct.
Any questions from council?
On the properties that have Douglas County and Carroll County, I'm one of them. Does Carroll County collect it and give Douglas County their portion of it? See, in my case, the county line's halfway down my driveway. The upper part of my driveway is in Douglas County, lower part of my house and all's in Carroll County.
Do you get 2 tax bills?
I get one from Carroll County. I'm just saying, do they collect for the Douglas County portion and pass it on? Because I don't ever get a tax bill from Douglas County.
I don't know. I'll have to check into that. I would assume you would have got received.
Maybe I
2
shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
Is your house on the Carroll County side?
It is.
Yeah. So you're gonna get.
And I heard that when we first started that Carroll County collects all the taxes and gives Douglas County their portion.
Oh, that's the way it used to be done?
That's the way it was in the beginning, so.
Yeah, I think if your house is in the county, they're gonna at least do the collections.
Okay.
They probably wouldn't get too much for part of your driveway. Any other questions? Anyone opposed to making this consent item number 1?
Thank you.
Thank you. Intergovernmental agreement with Douglas County. Does this have to do with the election?
Yes.
It doesn't say, okay.
morning.
That's what I thought it was from what I remember reading, okay.
Teresa Campbell, city clerk. Yes, we were approached by Douglas County that they would like to have a intergovernmental agreement that is only between the city of Villarica and Douglas County, where previously in both 2011 and in 2015 we had an intergovernmental agreement that included both Carroll and Douglas counties, where they acknowledged that the city of Villarica was in both counties. And so I expect that you will be seeing a standalone intergovernmental agreement with Carroll County in the coming months. I've already spoken to them. I believe that the elections supervisor in Carroll is working on it. Pretty much this agreement, it has been reviewed by the city attorneys and by me and by finance director Jennifer Holland, interim deputy city manager, and it is the same as in previous years, except for there is a specification of $3 per registered voter within the Douglas County side, which does give a framework, and in the staff recommendations there is a breakdown of what that would be. If we were working from the numbers previously, we were about 6,500 registered voters on the Douglas County side of Villarica and the last election, which would have been $19,500. In actuality, we were billed $21,797. So this would be to our benefit that and make it easier for budgeting purposes that there is an amount attached per registered voter. I've also attached the runoff and the general election bills from the 2023 election.
Any questions?
Is this amount for each voter, is that for the ones that vote, or is that for the
It
registered
is
voters?
total registered voters within the county.
So why is the runoff amount less
We did not have a per registered voter section to the previous agreement. So all that I have is what is attached on the two spreadsheets that the elections office in Douglas County provided us. They had 3 parts that went into how they came up with those numbers.
Okay.
I would assume it had something to do with the fact that the ballot did not have to go out to all of Douglas County. It just went out to Villa Rica because of the runoff. And it also decreased the share that we needed for poll workers at the precinct. They would have only had 1 precinct running.
Okay, adjusted amount. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a couple questions. I guess, so first, Teresa, I guess what prompted this? I mean, why do they want this change?
That I'm not sure. They approached us. In the service delivery strategy, it refers back in that agreement to previous IGAs. It was 2015 was the last one that we had. Prior to that, it was 2011. So it may have just been, we're in an election year and they were going through, but they did approach us. There seems to be on the election supervisor's opinion, and they also have a new council, I believe, at Douglas County, that they wanted an agreement that was, as I said, directly between us and Douglas County, and then we would have one with us and Carroll. And if you look at the 2015, we were all on one agreement together.
So I guess, so you're expecting something similar then from Carroll, where they're going to charge us per person, per head, or per voter, I should say?
The Douglas County election supervisor reached out to the Carroll County and sent the agreement to him, so he is aware of what our agreement moving forward, should you approve it next Tuesday, what it would be. So I do expect something similar. The approach to billing in Carroll and Douglas have been different in the past, with Carroll looking at how much their county citizens pay as county taxes. So I don't know if the number will be different. We haven't gotten into that part of a discussion.
So I remember like a few years ago, not in any of the recent elections, but there was one election in which the Douglas County voters were allowed to early vote at Powell Park, even though it's in Carroll. Would that, I mean, if we were to explore something like that, would this be a good time to ask about that in this IGA? But since we're doing separate IGAs for Douglas and a separate one for Carroll, does that eliminate that possibility going forward?
I have spoken to Mr. Mbala and Mr. Kidd, who both are on work in Douglas County, and the last time that there was an election where that did happen, where both counties were in the same location, it predated both them and I. Whenever I have spoken to them about it, about what that could look like, we haven't talked. I haven't talked with Mr. Ock in Carroll County in the same conversation with them, because he is new and was dealing with coming on with a presidential election. So I have not had the conversation with him. But the only concern I think that is sort of a stumbling block is the securing of their machines within Powell Park and the space that would be needed, because they would still have to have their poll workers.
Okay.
And Douglas would have to have their poll workers, and they would each secure their machines within the facility. And I don't know if the way that Powell Park is set up currently that can be done, but they are willing to discuss it. It may be more of an agreement between Carroll and Douglas.
Okay.
An election specific agreement.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a memory of, we had to do these prior, but of getting into the specifics of it. So is this pretty standard that they base it on the number of registered voters as to what you would pay to the in this case, it would be the tax collector.
Oh, no, this
Tax
is
commissioner.
election.
I'm sorry, election.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the standard. In Carroll County in the past, I think they've charged cities based on the number of poll workers that they had to use, so.
And I can't help but think about how many people are registered that do not vote, because they're automatically, it's motor voter, so if you go to get your driver's license, they'll say, you'll be registered to vote, so you're paying for a lot of people that don't vote, and that's why I was asking if it was standard. It seems to me the machines might be a fairer way of charging cities, but anyway, I don't know if we have any pull on that, any cards to play that changes anything, or if we just pretty much need to acquiesce to what they require.
Each election board
Yeah.
has their guidance as to how many poll workers they have per precinct, and each county has the budget that they submit to their elections office as to what they have to work with.
And that part makes absolute sense, how many poll workers they need to have there and the machines and the setup they have to do.
And they
Okay.
do have two different personalities, both counties. So they, of course, approach things differently. I will point out, though, that in this new agreement, even though they approached us, that it is a definite amount, and it would have been less in the last election under this $3 per registered voter.
This one's more advantageous, if I heard you correctly.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? Anyone opposed to making this consent item number 2? All right, item number 4, appointment of Downtown Development Authority.
Thank you. This item actually needs to be tabled, if possible, to the next meeting. Last night, DDA met and they heard the application, but they did not make a motion. I think there's been some changes over the last year or so, and perhaps the board makeup and some procedures. So there's some things that staff needs to do to clean up on their end, but they did ask for the applicant to come in and do an interview process before them. So we felt that that was important for that to take place first. So if this item could be tabled until March 25th / April 1st meeting.
I see. Okay, thank you. All right, building development. Item number 1, Fairway 17, final plat. Mr. Elliott.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Fairway 17 is the next platted subdivision that's coming on board in Mirror Lake, and there's one left, which will be Northwoods at Mirror Lake Phase 3, and it's under construction right now. This plat has been reviewed. All fees, bonds, everything have been paid. Fairway 17 was part of the Mirror Lake Master Plan rezoning, PUD rezoning back in 21. This particular development was zoned for 143 lots with a minimum of 8,000 square feet. The plat actually has 112 lots. And they have some lots that are 16,000 square feet. So we think it's going to be one of the more upscale developments in Mirror Lake. One other thing, it has a maintenance bond that has been posted. It also has a performance bond. This particular development has 3,400 linear feet of 10-foot walking path around the lake. That's got to be done, and it's also got to have a gazebo constructed as part of the zoning conditions. And we have $127,000 worth of performance bond posted as well. So staff recommends approval of the plat.
Any questions from council?
And I've got a couple of full-size sets of drawings of the plat. Should anybody want to see it other than on a computer screen, we have it. So
Anyone opposed to making this consent?
Oh, I have one. I'm
yes.
sorry, Leslie. I
didn't
have
see
one
you.
question.
That's okay. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
You ran. I know you did, but I just want to verify. You ran this by the HOA, and they're okay with it, right?
yes,
Okay, I just wanted to verify before I said anything.
Anyone opposed to making this consent item number 3? All right, that'll be number 3. Thank
Thank you.
you. Community Development, ABL-03-25, Honest Commercial Inc., doing business as Discount Smokes and Beer. This will require a public hearing, so it'll come back next week for that part.
Good morning,
Good
Mayor
morning.
and Council. Whitney Cox, Licensing Specialist. The first application is for Honest Commercial Incorporated, doing business as Discount Smokes and Beer. That is the yellow store located at 733 West Bankhead Highway. The applicant has had to reapply for an alcohol license due to not renewing for the New Year's license on time. We've been trying to get this on the agenda for a couple months now. The owner was out of the country, and we had some issues with background checks coming back, but we are ready to go. So he will be here Tuesday night in hopes to get his alcohol sales back up and running.
So when they lapse like that, don't they have to put up some sort of notice that says they can't sell alcohol because this license has lapsed?
Yes,
Do we-
and they had to kind of cordon off their beer coolers there.
I see. So we do some sort of check to make sure that's what they're doing?
Yes,
Okay.
PD is aware, and I'm sure Patrol has been checking in and monitoring that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council? All right, we'll have that public hearing next Tuesday. And Ms. Cox, you have another one here, I think the same thing, lapse and license?
No, this is
This one.
actually going
Oh,
to
this
be a
is
new
the
restaurant.
new, something fusion.
It's
coming on here.
Latin Fusion.
Latin Fusion,
what I
the new,
understand, yes.
new restaurant coming on
Yes.
board. Yes, ma'am.
Captivating Camino LLC. They're moving into the old Charlie's there at 921 Morris Ferry Road, Suite A. And they are applying for a pouring license to pour malt beverages, beer, and or malt beverages, wine, and distilled spirits at the restaurant.
Any questions from council? Just seeing this on here, I think will pique some people's interest because of all the talk we hear about wanting to see additional variety of restaurants. I've heard some positive things online, but I'm not really familiar
Yeah.
with the type of restaurant, but we were told it would be different and new.
Yes, they're being pretty tight-lipped about what's going to be on the menu. So hopefully it's a pleasant surprise for everybody.
All right, that cannot be consent item because that'll be a public hearing next Tuesday. Item number 3 also will require a hearing, TA-05-25, sign ordinance text amendment. This will be Mr. Daniels. Morning.
Good morning, Council. Sean Daniels, Planning and Zoning Administrator. So recently, the Community Development, Planning and Zoning, as well as Code Enforcement have been working closely together in relation to things that they've seen out in the field. And we have comprised a couple text amendments here for the sign ordinance. So the first section is in regards to section 9.03, application information and review fee. I've done some extensive review over the surrounding properties and jurisdictions of both Douglas and Carroll County, and I have noticed that our review fee is a fraction of what they all have been asking businesses and citizens to pay. So both Carroll County, Douglas, Douglasville, Carrollton, they all asked for a $50 review fee. So we wanted to go ahead and increase our review fee to get on the standard as everyone else in the surrounding jurisdictions.
So did we also feel that the fee was necessary? In other words, we're not just copying them. We felt like ours was outdated.
Yes, ma'am.
It takes some time and review to do this, and, okay, all right.
Yes, ma'am. Especially for developments, they have like a whole book of signs. So we have to go ahead and assess those and make sure that it is sometimes time consuming.
We have a pretty extensive sign ordinance too. I know
Yes, we
that.
do.
Was it like 67 pages or something? I remember reading it. I was grateful to have some pictures in there that gave examples, especially in the historic district. Any questions from, oh, I'm sorry, you're not done. That's that's section 9.03, because I know we had several changes.
Yes, ma'am. So the next section is section 9.04, and that is the time for consideration and issuance. Since I've been here for about a year and a half, we have not implemented issuing stickers to business owners. So we want to go ahead and take out a sticker or other device bearing the sign permit number shall be affixed to the sign ordinance, to the sign structure, excuse me. Just so we can go ahead and have the sign ordinance be on par with our current practices today. The reasoning why we want to go ahead and take that out is because one of our code enforcement officers, he's our manager, he used to work for Douglasville for about 20 years, and they started to implement something similar over there, and they have noticed over about 3 to 4 years, those sign stickers that go on the back of it start to not show due to weathering. So we do use, electronics to our
Makes sense.
our benefit. So if anybody has ever any type of rebuttal or need extensive information, we can go ahead and pull that up by via shared drive. The next section is regards to section 9.929, which is wall signs. Staff wanted to go ahead and add some verbiage pertaining to borders and frames for metal vinyl wall signs. Those metal vinyl wall signs are like a very, very thin piece of metal, and usually business owners, they use those. It's relatively inexpensive and compared to a channel illuminated sign. So these we have noticed that code enforcement have brought to our attention that over a couple years they have tack-ons or screws on the borders of those, and they either get rusted and start to run down, or those screws start to come out sometimes. So they wanted to go ahead and implement for both for durability as well as aesthetic, to have a border frame for those signs. We did want to have some uniformity with those borders and have those colors that to be permitted within the city be either black, white, gray, or tan, as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission did want to add some verbiage pertaining to the type of materials that will be put, for the those signs, for those border frames. So we did some research, and we came to the conclusion that PVC, aluminum, treated wood, composite wood, stainless steel, fiberglass, galvanized steel, and acrylic will all be durable, rust-proof, and weather-resistant over the years. And these borders will just, again, add a extra component for the durability as well as it being aesthetically pleasing. We also have some verbiage pertaining to what the thickness of those borders in relation to the sign face. And we did put inside our city ordinance that all wide signs up to 10 square feet should have a border no less than 1 inch. Any wall sign that is 10 to 50 square feet shall have a border no less than 2 inches. Any wall sign that is 50 to 100 square feet, and this is the sign face, shall have a border no less than 3 inches. And then lastly, any signs that have a sign face that is 100 square feet or more shall have at least a border of 4 inches. And as you can see, these are some businesses within the city currently. The two on the left are these vinyl metal wall signs, and they don't have a border. And then the one on the right does have a 4-inch border for its sign face. I do believe it's around, give or take, maybe 90 to 100 square feet. And As you can tell, it's a little more aesthetically pleasing, as well as durable. The next section is regards to section 9.39, which is temporary signs. Staff wanted to go ahead and add a word inside the setback section of our ordinance. Just talking to code enforcement and seeing that sometimes business owners and citizens, when they do call the community development department asking where can they put their either bandit signs or lawn, like those small lawn signs you can put down, they put them very close to the street right away as well as the adjacent properties. And we do have some verbiage within our city ordinance currently, but we want to go ahead and add all signs shall be placed a minimum of 10 feet from the public right of way and any other property line. And hopefully that can just clear up and mitigate some questions that they do have and bring to the city, as well as code enforcement can go ahead and continue to implement our code within the city.
I'm thinking we probably need to make sure people know that, I don't know whether, I know we already pick up things like mattresses for sale and, unauthorized signs that are put on the right-of-way around the city. When we're talking about 10 feet from the right-of-way, usually that didn't apply, and I'm looking over at the attorney here too, usually that wouldn't apply if somebody had a sign in their yard, as long as it was far enough off the sidewalk. I don't remember the specifics, because it's almost impossible at times to go 10 feet in from the right-of-way in someone's yard. Do we have some flexibility in that area?
I have to double check, but usually this is pertaining to somebody putting a sign out in front of their business.
Yeah.
So I have to double check and get back with you with that.
Okay, thank you.
And lastly, section 9.40 is in regards to temporary signs as well, but this is pertaining to the standards and the inflatable object section. Again, dealing with inspections and talking to code enforcement, we have noticed that inflatable signs are starting to pop up a little more frequently. And some business owners have proposed and sometimes put up and erected some signs on either their roof or on another object. And it can cause for some safety concerns, both for staff going out there and committing and doing inspections, as well as, God forbid, if any weather or high winds do throw off whatever is affixing those objects to the ground, that hopefully that they don't come up, as well as the sign itself, and either hit a citizen, business owner, or their property. So this is just putting some verbiage on there to clear it up, that any of these inflatable objects do have to be affixed on the ground.
Aren't those, it's a long signed ordinance, aren't those the ones, okay, so they have the little thing that blows up and waves around, things like that, but aren't those considered a temporary sign?
Yes, ma'am.
And there used to be like a fee attached to that, a certain amount of timing. O'Charlie's used to put out a sign, it was considered a temporary sign, free pie Wednesday, that type of thing. So is that still consistent with what we're doing now?
Yes, ma'am. It's 30 days, and they can renew it up to 3 times a year. And this is specifically pertaining to those inflatable signs, kind of similar to during Christmas, like the Rudolph and the Santa signs. Usually some business owners have customized signs, and they put them up on their roof.
Okay, all right. Yes. Councilwoman Wormuth.
I was waiting for you to finish with the presentation before I interjected. Were you finished?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So some of this feels a little restrictive for business owners. For instance, with the temporary signs, a sidewalk sign or a window sign, I'm not sure why that would be an issue or need any sort of temporary signage. Again, that feels very restrictive. I know a lot of the downtown businesses, because of the traffic, we're trying to get pedestrians out and walk in downtown. And those window signs or those sidewalk signs are what is going to attract customers to come into their business. So I'm not in favor of this part at all. Again, I don't think that, me personally, don't believe that it is something that the city should require for a temporary signage for something like that. I also have concerns about the borders on the metal signs that you're referring to. A lot of the downtown businesses have metal signs that are up. And the historic overlay already has so many other restrictions as it is. And I know that the exact size of those signs, if a business owner has a sign at the top of the building as well as a hanging sign, that square footage of those signs are combined for the total signage amount that's allowed. So are these borders going to add to the size of that sign?
No, ma'am. No. So for the border itself, we'll be looking at, for, and this is review purposes, we'll be looking at the sign face before they add on to the border, because staff, we are already aware of what the measurement of the border is once they do submit that sign permit application.
Well, I'd also be curious to know, because you had mentioned that over time the signs are not holding up properly. And I tend to disagree unless you can show me exactly which businesses, for example, and by no means am I asking you to call out any individual business in a public platform, but I would be curious to know I would like some examples of what it is that you're referring to, because I have not seen any signs that have not held up well, and I know, for instance, with my business, I had a sign initially that the material did not hold up well, and it was my responsibility as a business owner to have that replaced. So for me, if the businesses choose to have a metal sign, I'm not sure that I'm in favor of the border. Is it more aesthetically pleasing? Sure. But how much more is that going to cost these business owners? And small businesses are already on a tight budget trying to open up their businesses. And I certainly wouldn't want, we want to be as open to these businesses as we possibly can be, because we've been trying for years to make sure that our downtown is filled up. So I have some concerns about the borders and then the temporary signage that I mentioned.
Okay. And which section are you talking about with the temporary signs, may I ask? Was it section 9.39 or?
It's section 9.40.
Okay. And 9.40 is specifically regarding inflatable signs. Now, I know you mentioned something about wall signs and.
Under 9.40, the window signs are under F, and G is the sidewalk signs. And at the top of that, with the general provisions, it states that the following types of signs are permitted as temporary signs and may require a sign permit. And then you had mentioned that those temporary signage was going to be changing, correct? The provisions that you were discussing putting into place?
Yes, for section 9.39, that was specifically for any type of post sign, or somebody puts out a pylon sign, or even those banded signs. We just wanted to make sure that we put some language stating that they have to abide by that 10-foot setback, as well as 10 feet away from the property line. Now for section 9.40, this is what we went ahead and added was specifically for inflatable objects. We just wanted to go ahead and make sure for safety purposes that we can go ahead and go out and inspect them safely. We don't have to go up on a ladder or a jib crane to make sure that they are secured proficiently, as well as we don't want any high winds to come up and swift away those inflatable signs and hit somebody. So yeah, our sign ordinance and these were specifically for these sections. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so there's no intent of changing the temporary signage with the windows or the
No, ma'am.
sidewalks? Okay.
Mr. Daniels, does any of this say business wants to put out what we would call like a sandwich sign? We don't charge for that, do we? Today's specials, you know, they set it out during the business, maybe attracts people in.
It kind of depends on what sign it is. If it's one of those, I think we call them. Yes, ma'am. Yes. If it's an A-frame sign, then yes, we do have a ordinance, a section on our ordinance that does prohibit those signs to be out long term. It's more like a temporary sign.
Long term, right, but, you know, daily, you're putting out the specials. We don't charge for that, do we?
They do have to fill out a sign permit application, and since we do have to conduct a review, they do have to pay for that.
Initially,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. So,
But if the
obviously,
special-
this is not going to be a consent item.
But if the special changes from pastrami to rye, they don't have to, I mean, every day, they don't have to.
I'm
No.
looking at the ordinance, and a sidewalk sign is, the picture, it looks like what you're talking about. And it says a permit's not required. Same
Right.
with a temporary sign in a window. The
Yeah,
permit
that's
would
what it
not be
says
required.
in the chart. You're right, permit not
Because it's been a
required.
period of years since I read all of this, and it's probably all highlighted and marked up somewhere on a hard copy. And I guess what Councilman Warmoth brought up made me think about some things that we don't always know what it is to be on the business side of doing these things. I think it's obvious, probably this is not going to be a consent item because everybody would have to agree.
It's a zoning
yes.
ordinance also.
And requires a public hearing, so I'm just one person, but I don't think it would hurt to run these things by actual business owners. Do we have a problem with signs? Like when I look and read what y'all are saying about, we want to have something with it, the borders that doesn't rust. I get that. You know, you don't want a sign up there and the rust is running down. It's not the kind of material that'll hold up, or it's flimsy and it'll fly around. So will this also mean if somebody puts up a Christmas decoration on their roof that's anchored, would that still, does that fall into this category? Because I don't see that as a sign.
No, it'll be for businesses.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about businesses.
Yeah, if
I'm
like
just
Don
not going to
Rich-
name any businesses.
Don Rich, yeah, if it's a car dealership, I'm sorry, that's not maybe.
Oh, that one's anchored to the ground. You mean the big
Well,
bowl?
I'm just saying, like, if a car dealership put like a big Santa Claus and Christmas tree on top of their roof, for the month of December or something, is that a sign?
It is a little bit inside the gray area. We kind of classify it as a sign as if it has a business logo or a name on there. Now, if they
Okay.
just put up a Rudolph on the roof, then that wouldn't be something that'll be subject to
Okay,
get permitted.
Okay.
Okay, I just,
Okay.
I didn't want
Fair
to
enough.
take fun out of things, right? Unless it truly is a safety issue. If we're creating one that's never happened, but anyway, okay, so
Here.
maybe, does anybody want to talk a little further about maybe what we want to do before this comes back next Tuesday?
Well, I just had a question for Sean, if
Yeah.
I could. So I'm a little intrigued by this borders idea too, because I think I know what you're referring to and what you're envisioning, but I really would like to see some examples of it.
Okay.
Because like I'm thinking about the sign in my law firm, and it doesn't have a border, and I do have it where the screws are into the brick, And so, I mean, with that, like, if you use my sign as an example, I mean, could you show me what the border will look like? Okay, I see.
Yes.
All right.
So the one in the right, now it's kind of hard to see, and we did have a discussion with that particular owner just to make sure that those tack-ons are inside the wall, because sometimes though they do come out a little bit, or if the tack-ons can get rusted, and then once that rusts, and like it can slowly drip down a little bit. And again, myself been working with code enforcement, and then just noticing that and talking to them and noticing things that they have seen out in the field, and they brought that to my attention, and they just wanted to see if we can. Again, it does look a little better, but they said that they've noticed that it can be a little bit more durable and maybe can last maybe a year or maybe 2 years, a little longer than them just having just a normal sign right there.
So I guess the next question is, like, I mean, I understand wanting some consistency, but for example, like you see the Ruff Law Firm. I mean, obviously it's got it's a white sign there. Well, I mean, I guess the State Farm actually. Well, I don't know. State Farm may or may not have been. I mean, you're requiring borders of a certain color, right? Like if a business's logos and colors were not one of the ones listed, black, white, tan, and I can't remember the other one, gray, I think it was. I mean, we're going to require them to put some kind of color that's kind of outside of their business's color scheme. I don't know. It just seems a little bit. I mean, I guess I can see the point in having the border, but I mean, if they put a hot pink border around because that's part of their color scheme for their logos, then I don't know if it's really the city's job to kind of get into that much of the minutia. I think I have some hesitation there.
Okay.
Particularly, it's kind of, I'm reminded of the Pelican controversy we had in Carrollton a couple years ago. So I just don't, I feel like we're getting a little bit deep in the weeds on, like, we're talking about specific colors. I get the idea, okay, fine. It has a border that's going to hold up better. I can see the rationale there, but I don't know if requiring certain colors. Maybe if we just say a color that's consistent with or complementary with the sign face, whatever, then that way, Miss Ruff can put that kind of, what color is that? I can't think of that color. That burgundy, I guess it's like a burgundy. I mean, she can put that burgundy border on there if she wanted to. That kind of accent her colors. I mean, if it were mine, then I would put my kind of royal blue around it to accent the colors of my law firm and kind of what I've done, instead of just putting a white border over a white sign.
Right.
So that's just my input. So.
Now, I'm assuming with the amount of people that would be grandfathered, it's not like we're going to go around and make everybody change their sign. So maybe between now and Tuesday, any of us that have an issue can kind of go back and forth with you and maybe clear up some things, concerns we have. Yes, go ahead.
So while some of the businesses would be grandfathered in, if they were to go and replace their sign, they would have to follow the same guideline. So businesses need to be aware of that as well, that while they may be grandfathered in, if this were implemented, then they would have to put that border up as well.
Okay, so I think we do have some concerns, so we can decide, this is the work session, so it'll be Tuesday before we decide, hey, we want to table this, or there's some disagreement, we want to do this part, but we don't want to do the other part. We're good with the inflatables being, tied down, but we're not crazy about this other thing. So let's just hang on to this one, and y'all, any concerns, questions, we have a week to deal with that. And be calling you and ask you more questions. But.
Please do.
All right. That's all you've got. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Daniels. All right, Finance, Ms. Hallman.
Good morning.
Morning.
Jennifer Hallman, interim deputy city manager / CFO. Let me begin by saying we had a very good and productive finance committee meeting this morning, and we discussed what I'm bringing before y'all today. And there is a slight change based upon our discussions this morning, but I will go over that one once we get there. Just to begin, as you know, last year y'all approved for me to have a reorganization in finance, and part of that reorganization was to include a position of purchasing director. This allowed us to have our first step to improve the purchasing process, as well as get more oversight, improve the purchasing process, and I placed Louise Clark in that position. And the first thing that I charged her with was look at our purchasing ordinance and our policy, and let's see if there's any updates, changes, improvements that we can do to the policy while still keeping the internal control, the oversight in place. Is there anything we could do to streamline the process and make it easier for the departments, easier for our staff, and easier for y'all to procure goods and services? So I'll go over each of the recommended changes. Of course, the ordinance itself is like 30 pages long. So you can get overly consumed with the ordinance trying to maybe pick it apart and do different changes. So what I asked Louise to do was let's look at some of the let's look at a few changes now. Let's incorporate those or recommend those. Hopefully they'll get approved and incorporated. And we'll just, as they say, eat the elephant one bite at a time. So we brought before y'all a few recommendations. And like I said, we discussed these in Finance Committee as well this morning. The first one was the purchasing authority limits. We recommend changing the authority limits due to the rising cost of procuring goods and services, streamlining the purchasing process for operations and projects, and bringing consistency to the limits. These changes are comparable to government entities our size and will still preserve the internal controls and proper oversight of purchasing. The first table that you'll see, it has the column for the approval authority. The next column is what the current purchasing authority limits are at. The third column is the proposed authority limits, and then the last column is just what the dollar increase from going from the current to the proposed. As you know, the current department head purchasing limit is $2,500. We're proposing that to go to $5,000, along with the utility department head, which John Bain has that position right now. His limit is $5,000. I believe back in 2022, Sarah brought a change to the limits at that time, and it was decided at that time that the utility department head would need a little bit more of a limit or higher limit than the other department heads. But since that time, like I said, with the rising cost of inflation and just streamlining the process, we want to make all department heads be the same limit. So we're proposing to go from $2,500 to $5,000. The deputy city manager is currently at $10,000. We're proposing $20,000. The city manager is currently at $25,000. We're proposing $35,000. And then Diana also suggested, which we liked, and other cities do it as well, is establish another approval authority. And what that would be the city manager's approval plus a member of the finance committee, council member. We would go in the order of the hierarchy, so we would be the chair, which currently is Councilman Carter. That would create a new authority, and that limit would be up to $50,000. And then anything above $50,000 would come before council. Currently, it is for city council. It is anything greater than $10,000, which did not make sense when reviewing this, considering that the city manager's current level is $25,000. What we think occurred is when the change was brought in 2022. it was changed at the city manager level, but did not make it all the way through the approval process. So again, we're bringing consistency in that correction, proposing it at this time. We're also asking that procurements over 50,000 that require council approval unless the specific item is approved in the adopted budget. As you know, when we're budget planning and we're giving budget presentations, we send y'all a list of different capital projects and items that the departments have asked for that we're proposing. We make changes to that based on priorities. And so then we have a final list of these are the projects or the capital items that are adopted in the budget. So what we want to do is if that specific item was approved in the budget, to allow us to move forward without having to bring it to you again in a meeting, because you've already approved it once in the adopted budget. If the item is changed a little bit, let's just say a department wanted one particular item that was specific in the budget, but then due to some changes or whatever, there was a minor change in what they want. Then what we're suggesting is up to the discretion of the city manager plus a finance committee council member, preferably the chair, would agree or approve that item, and then again we could move forward with the procuring that item. So that would be the first change that we're asking for. I don't know if you want me to go through each of these or stop and wait for if y'all have questions, or go through each of them and wait for questions afterward.
Do you have a preference? Okay, I'm good with us going to questions without you having to go through each one. Questions from council?
We talked about this morning in our finance committee meeting, so 3 of us have already kind of asked our questions at least.
Yes.
Okay, so when it's already budgeted, I think we feel a little differently about it anyway. Now, we did have something with prior city manager at one time, and maybe you all covered this in your meeting, where we didn't necessarily have to approve, but we wanted to be notified if a certain expenditure. Did y'all discuss anything like that? Like if it were $50,000?
Yes, all of this is just if there's a small change that's made. If it's a budgeted item, it's a budgeted item. It's been approved specifically for some, whatever in particular. But and we used the example of a vehicle. So if the F-250 is what was approved, but somebody decided that they wanted to do an F-150 instead, or a different year of the same model, then they would come before this committee for approval, and there's really no reason for it to come back before council. It's still a
Holds it up a
budgeted
whole nother
item.
month sometimes.
Right, it's still it's still a budgeted item, but just small changes that would be made would be approved through that committee.
Okay.
And of course, it would be within budget. It would
Okay.
have to still be within the budget that was adopted.
Correct.
Anything else from, well, it can be from anybody, but specifically from the finance committee that you just want to make sure gets said or known? Okay, that was helpful. Thank you.
Okay. All right, the next item that staff is recommending are the purchasing method thresholds. We'll start with the first box right there that says current purchasing method. Right now, from 0 to 2,500 is an informal purchasing method and a purchase order is issued. The next is anything greater than 2,500 to 10,000 is still an informal method, but 3 written quotes are required and then a purchase order. Then the final one is anything greater than 10,000 is a formal method, meaning that an RFQ or an RFP has to be done, and then a purchase order is issued. Again, for the same reasons that we're asking for the authority limit increases would be the same reasons that we're asking for the threshold for whether to go for an informal bid, 2 quotes, 3 quotes, or an RFQ and RFP. What we're suggesting is 0 to 5,000 be an informal, and it would be a purchase order. Greater than 5,000 to 10,000 would be an informal with two written quotes and a purchase order. Anything greater than 10,000 up to 50,000 would be an informal, but there would be three written quotes to the purchasing department, not to the department head that is asking for the item. And then a purchase order would be issued. And then anything greater than 50,000 would be a formal method, meaning that there would be an RFQ or an RFP, go through that process, and then a purchase order would be issued. And I added a note down here just to let you know that along with other municipalities, the state actually has a House Bill 137 out there that is the public works bidding, which is they're suggesting increasing the threshold from 100,000 to 250,000 for public works projects. And you can see the last sentence is the same reason that we're coming before y'all. Regarding our limits, is they're saying that with rising construction costs, the proposed change would give cities more flexibility to manage smaller projects efficiently.
Yeah, because it's exponentially more than it used to be
Yes.
for items that we were doing. So for the sake of citizens who are watching or listening, would you explain just briefly in a nutshell why at times you would not want to go through the formal bidding process, what it's involved, maybe time, cost, so people have an idea of why you need to do it, but why it's advantageous to avoid it in certain circumstances.
Right. You listed the main two reasons, is the time that it takes. Sometimes the items, yes, there are some additional or planning that you can do for RFQs and RFPs ahead of time, but also the staff time that it takes to get the RFP or RFQ drafted, reviewed, submitted, then have enough time for vendors to bid, get those bids back, try to make the deadline of council meetings. So timing is a big part of it. And also just with the cost of everything, items, individual items are rising in cost, and it just doesn't really, getting written quotes is just as beneficial as going to RFP and RFQ on some circumstances.
And you inferred they're more efficient,
Yes.
quicker. You can move
Streamlined.
along, not get bogged down as much.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to say the other doesn't have a place. Obviously, it does. Okay, all right, thank you, appreciate that.
The next item that we brought before or discussed this morning with the Finance Committee, and this is the one that's going to have a little bit of changes than what you see up here, is the local vendor preference. The city acknowledges local vendors contribute to the tax base and promote the local economy. Currently, a local vendor is defined as any business or firm having an office located within the boundaries of the city of Villa Rica and has a current Villa Rica occupational tax certificate on the closing date of solicitation for which the offer has been submitted. We were suggesting a slight change or a change in the definition to include not just the boundaries of the city, but to include the two county boundaries in which the city lies, Douglas and Carroll. But after discussions within the Finance Committee, we want to hold off on that for right now and still maintain the boundaries within the city limits. So that particular recommended change, we just didn't have time. Our meeting was from 8:30 to 9:30 this morning, so we didn't have time to make the change on the agenda. But we do not want to change the definition yet. We want to keep the definition the same. But we did review the ordinance, and when we saw that the local vendor preference was mentioned, it was only mentioned when there are tie bids. And there was no other mention of a local vendor preference. And in tie bids, it pretty much said if there's two tied bids, both are responsive. If one's a local vendor, one's not, then you go with the local vendor. We wanted to expand that a little bit to give more concessions to a local vendor because we do see the importance of using local vendors. So the concession we do want to keep or recommend, which is a local vendor preference may be given when the total amount of the lowest unit bid does not exceed $75,000. And if the local vendor submits a bid and is within 5%, but not greater than $3,750 of the lowest bid from a non-local vendor, which would still be in the boundaries of the city limits, then the quote or the bid from the local vendor shall be deemed to have the lowest bid. So that is the additional concession in addition to the tie bids that we want to add, or we're suggesting to recommend to add to the purchasing ordinance. We also wanted to make sure that we covered ourselves and also were cognizant of our budget. And so we said that if there were multiple purchases of the same item, then we would have to put a cap, a cap on the multiple purchase bid. And what that would be looking at the unit price, make sure that it meets the 5% and the 3,750 rule, and the total cost of all items collectively is within $5,000 of the price of the responsive bid from a non-local vendor. The next page just gives you two scenarios just so we could make sure we were very clear on how each rule would be met. Scenario one would be where the local vendor met the 5% rule, met the $3,750 rule, but the collective cost of all the units purchased was greater than the $5,000, so we could not award that to the local vendor. The second scenario, they met the 5%, they met the $3,750, and all of the units were no greater than the $5,000. They were actually just $3,000 more, so we would be able to award to the local vendor. And then last but not least, and most departments are doing this, but we wanted to have it specifically written in the ordinance, is that any kind of hardware or software that a department may need or want, we want to make sure that our IT department is aware and also approves it before we procure it, because there's all kinds of things, and Jim can get more into the technical aspect of it, but there's software, there's server, there's storage, there's bandwidth, all the stuff that also goes into getting software and everything, and we want to make sure it fits within our framework of our current IT mainframe.
That makes absolute sense.
Yes. And like I said, most departments are doing it, but we just want to make sure that since we're cleaning it up and really trying to update our policy, we just wanted to make sure that that was included as well. And that is it.
Any questions from council? Yes, Councilman McCoy.
On the local vendor thing, well, I don't want to be anti-local vendor, but I also want to be aware of the budget and everything. So this, in the one scenario you give, if that's our only scenario, that's fine. But what if there are 10 scenarios a year where we're paying an extra, if we pay an extra $3,000 times 10, what's that, 30,000? Then that's $30,000 of taxpayer money that could have been used on the same product but cheaper.
Sure.
That is an excellent point, and that's where Jennifer's team did come up with a cap, and I understand your concern. One of the highlights of the 101 training, once we kind of get some hard procedures down and we can talk to the team and talk to staff, and I'm happy to educate the public too, is to really look at the dollars that those businesses are investing in our local community as well, because it really does end up as a wash or ultimately good to the city when you add the occupational taxes, when you add the utilities that they pay, when you add the sales tax that gets remitted. It really does end up being a win-win situation for both the small business
and the city. While again, I appreciate that cap and making sure that there aren't those workarounds and not trying to pick on any department. But we all know from time to time it can be easier to just get what you need at that time. So we are really going to work hard in these trainings to say we're not going to go out and get things 5 times because we want to do an informal bid process. We're going to do it right. We're going to plan for the year and we're going to procure, and that's how we're going to stay within that $5,000 cap.
Okay, and I mean, it would be great if we have 10, 20 local businesses that are doing this. That would be great. But I'm just saying that at what point are we, as a collective of all of them, are we going to say enough's enough?
Can I just add, and I mean, it's an excellent point. You know, we don't need to overspend I mean, if there's an opportunity to purchase a product for less, I agree. At the same time, it's almost like we're investing in our businesses too, because some sort of bid like this, where, yeah, we may spend a little more up front for a local business, how much is that business not only bringing in that moment, but also in the future? And that a purchase like that can be substantial for a small business. And that purchase is what could keep that small business in business. So I think we have to think about that too, long term. If they go out of business, how much is the city going to lose with them going out of business? So I just wanted to point that out as well.
And Stephanie brings up a good point. My point is, I just want to make sure we are investing and not subsidizing. Absolutely. That's what I would like to know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any other questions or discussion? Is anyone opposed to making this consent item number 4?
I am. I would prefer, until we have everything in writing, that we do not put this on a consent agenda.
Yeah, we wanted to remove the local vendor definition, keep it the same, but we want to
Okay.
have it in the official records.
And you know
before.
what? This may have needed to happen this way because of the busy schedules and everything else, but in the future, if there's any chance to have that finance meeting a little earlier, then we'll have this all worked out by now, and the rest of us can kind of get an update ahead of time. So I found that would have been helpful for me to kind of know what you all had done. Maybe I even need to be there. That's a little challenge right now, but that might help us going forward to get these things worked out before the meeting.
I appreciate the time of the meeting. It works out very well with our schedules, that we go to the finance meeting and come straight to the work session. And any changes that need to be made can be made before the council meeting. So I'm not going to speak for the rest of the financial committee, but that's where I'm at with it. I appreciate it.
And also, just because we don't put it on the consent agenda doesn't mean it won't get approved. It's just not going to be a carry-along. We'll spend a little bit of time on it, but not much.
Okay, so if it works on everyone's schedule, that's good. But I wouldn't mind getting some kind, well, there's not time to get the update. So when we get in here is when we'll kind of hear what you guys discussed. Okay.
Yeah, you don't expect this to happen very often, though.
Correct.
Okay. All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item E1, Parks and Recreation, Ms. Ivy, and the July 3rd fireworks display.
Well, it's getting to be that time again.
Time flies.
Yes, it does. We'll start our interdepartmental meetings and everything soon on this, but this is our annual contract for our July 3rd fireworks display. We solicited bids. We had one responsive bidder, and it's the company that has done our show in the last few years, and they do a phenomenal job. So we're asking today for approval to select the fireworks contractor to do our show again. It's Pyro Shows East Coast, and we're fortunate. I think that they love coming to Villa Rica, so they we know they're gonna always bid on it, and I believe the reason we get one bid is because companies pick and choose what they want to do. And there's also a limit on crews that can come out that are certified, permitted, licensed to do these things. So there are not a whole lot of folks of those in the business. So we're fortunate to have this company like Villa Rica so much.
You already answered my one question.
And what was that?
That's okay.
Never mind.
And it
That's
really
good.
wasn't. It was the single bid, and I pretty much assume that
Yeah.
they do a good job every time. And companies probably look and go, they're probably going to go with that company they were really pleased with, and they can. It's costly and time consuming for them to participate in the bidding process. So
It is.
I wouldn't even say it was a question as much as it was just floating around in my head.
Okay, how much was the cost for last year?
Last year was 35,000.
Okay.
The increase this year is attributed to the insurance increases for them, labor, and shipping transport.
Okay.
So fortunately, we got in before all the tariffs hit, so hopefully next year we may have to limit not to an exceed amount, but anyway.
Any questions? Any other discussion on this item? Anyone opposed to making this consent item number 4? All right. C4. Thank you.
Thank you.
Public Works, Mr. Birch.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Hale Birch,
Morning.
Public Works Director. I stand before you today to bring to you the potential addition, of 2 additional stop signs and stop bars on Thomas Dorsey Drive. You will see attached the results of a speed study that we had performed on that road. And while the results did not warrant any additional traffic calming measures, we did recognize that there was some speeding concerns on that road. And with the proximity of the school, it made sense to try and do something. So after meeting with Bobby, we concluded that the best way to be able to approach this would be to add 2 additional stop signs on that road, which in turn has to affect the amount of speed, on that street. So you can see we would recommend, the approval of the addition of the 2 additional stop signs, a 3-way stop, We had also gone through and added some additional signage, the 25-mile-per-hour signs. We felt that if we added some more and then replaced some other weathered signs, that certainly that would impact that in a positive way.
I appreciate you addressing this. I've been holding on to that email with the traffic study for just a little bit, knowing that we would come back and visit this. I was hoping actually to get over there and drive that section and imagine the stop signs being there, but not driving right now because of my surgery. But I noticed for some period of time, and Ms. Shirley, you probably might have some input on this too, their sidewalk is like on the road on sections there, is it not? I mean, there's like zero, you feel like almost zero protection from the cars, and there's a little bit of a blind area, I believe, when you're coming up from Glanton Heinsman, is that right, coming around, and so even somebody crossing the road could be really hazardous, and of course, we have the elementary school over there. So I'm glad to see us putting in something that requires people's, the signage is there, unless they run the stop sign, requires them to stop and maybe ease that up and make it safer over there for the community. Do you have anything you want to add to that as to what you've observed?
I see the signs and I'm glad you all did. But down where Thomas Dorsey, I'm sorry, excuse me. I don't usually talk, so I don't usually turn it on. But this is not about that. Right down there where Thomas Dorsey in Montgomery, where that sign has been knocked over. You know what I'm talking about?
Vaguely.
Where Montgomery comes and goes out, and then Thomas Dorsey is straight right there at that stop sign. It looks like somebody's knocked it over. Okay. And it's still been, it's been 3 or 4 weeks, I think, since has anything been done. But I do appreciate the stop sign and the speed limits and the no parking signs, because they just don't seem to even the parents, and they don't seem to observe the signs up there. It's just like, it's not me. But thanks for what you all have done, and I know you're going to do something else.
We'll double check that sign specifically that you're speaking of, but I believe that has been replaced here in the last couple of days.
Oh, okay.
So I'll double check it.
Yeah.
Councilman Warman?
The stop sign that you're recommending at Daniel Road is, that one's fine. The concern would be at Eleanor Walk. And the reason being is because during during pickup, Glanton Heinzman requests that parents line up on Thomas Dorsey Drive and that they come up through East Wilson Street and then line up on Thomas Dorsey. There are always people who try to cut up through Eleanor Walk and just cut on through into the line. So of course, if people had the ability to go that way with a stop sign, then of course they would be able to go and cut on through, right? Does that make sense? So, because if you've got a three-way stop sign, if you've got the line backed up here, then whoever comes up through Eleanor would, at the stop sign, once this person's gone, then the next person gets to go, so they would have the right of way. So what this would seem to me to create would be more traffic on Eleanor Walk, and potentially traffic out to East Montgomery Street, depending on how many people tried to go that way.
So the law states if you are stopped on a road, you cannot block an opposing street. So even if there was no stop sign there, you could not park your vehicle in front of that road because what it would create is an emergency situation where emergency vehicles would not be able to come through. So even if the stop sign was not there, they would not be able to block Eleanor Walk while they were parked on Thomas Dorsey Road.
I don't know that I'm following that.
So even irregardless of the stop sign, they couldn't pull their vehicle up to keep any traffic from coming off of Eleanor Walk. They would have to park behind that.
But they would be able to. No, please.
Let me see if I can translate here. What I think she's saying is that during the drop off, they are on Eleanor Walk and they're cutting in. So
Yes.
if you have the stop sign, the three-way stop, they can come up to Eleanor Walk. Once there gets a length of a car, they're going to turn off Eleanor Walk and take that person's spot from.
That's what you're saying.
From.
So I'm thinking all the cars that are parked stacked up.
Oh,
there.
no, not parked.
Okay.
I understand what you were saying now. I get it. Thank you.
And anyone who has dropped a child off in elementary school for drop off or pickup knows that it's a dog eat dog world out there.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. You've got parents that they will go to pick up their child and sit in line starting at 12:30, 1 o'clock. No joke.
That's true.
So you've already got people who are already lined up, and then. Again, my concern would be that, one, they're cutting on through, and two, once people start figuring that out, you're going to have traffic that's waiting at that stop sign to turn on Eleanor Walk.
Understood.
So I'm sorry I didn't explain that very well to begin with.
I wasn't following.
No, I'm glad you translated.
That's because you haven't spent much time over there, which I've only spent limited, but traffic law would require that this
Right.
person wait while the person coming up Eleanor Walk could get into line there. Okay, so what's our solution?
Well, one thing to put this in perspective, I would like to say, at my daughter's elementary school, when a teacher did not pull up all the way to the front thing and backed up traffic, and this is not at a stop sign or anything, I was not the only parent who was irritated. And I was probably cursing them as much as I've cursed in Atlanta traffic. So just say it is a dog eat dog world out there.
Yeah, 'cause it's just so, if people that are going somewhere are trying to get somewhere, and then all this traffic is there, and, that's a hazard, period. 'Cause if somebody's coming up Thomas Dorsey from wherever, and they can't get to where they're going because the traffic, it's just like you say, it's just stacked on top of each other. So I don't even see a solution for that problem. Because you coming from town, and you coming up Wilson Street to get to your house, down through there, then you got to take a chance to get over in the other lane, and that big old Midway truck sitting there. And then what you just have to take a chance, because you don't know if somebody's coming down, and you got to get over there so you can go. It's just a mess. That's the only way you can put it.
Long for the days of walking and riding bikes to school, huh? Everybody's in a car almost now.
I would certainly think, based on the traffic study, that the safety concern would trump an inconvenience.
Yeah.
I'll do whatever you tell me to do.
You all are trying. That's the good part about it. It's not you just not doing anything. And I don't know if you're going to ever get the right solution for doing it. But at least you all are giving it some concern and trying.
What's the percentage of the speeding that's happening during school hours?
So that will be found on the attached sheet. So you would probably want your combined, let me see which one here is combined. Okay, so the first page 1 that has the actual data sheet will show the times and the amount of traffic. So so obviously the higher amount of traffic is going to be during peak hours, but you're speeding, let's see, highest interval volume, you're speeding. I'm not sure that I'm seeing it laid out specifically.
Because that's something I would like to know, is because of course safety is a top priority, and it's not so much the inconvenience that I'm speaking of. It is more so of how parents are lining up. And as Anna pointed out, it's a dog-eat-dog world. So once parents are already coming down Eleanor Way to pick up their kids and cut on through the line, which is why the school has announced numerous times to make sure that you're lining up on Thomas Dorsey, and that's not always what ends up happening.
I know they have an officer there on the campus area where you're going in. I recall mainly from morning drop-off when I was doing some of that for our grandson. Did they have the ability to have anyone out there at that intersection to control that? Because if you come up Eleanor Walk, what they really want you to do is go down they really want you to come up further down.
From East
So
Wilson.
you're not entering in the middle of where they're lining up. Anyone that lives over there, I would expect that if you have another way to go at that time of day, you learn that. So the people that get caught in the traffic, I'm assuming, are the people who aren't thinking what time of day it is, and you don't want to go near the city entrance and exit. School.
They don't have the ability to have an officer out at Eleanor Way. Like that's a good ways from where the entrance is. So, I mean, I understand that wouldn't be a possibility. But I'm a little concerned about the stop sign right there. I do agree that if we've got speeding issues, then we need to look into some sort of solution. But I mean, listen, I was aware of how parents come through to pick up their kids because I've had a child at that school for, I don't know, at least 10 years now. So I'm aware of the process and where the issues lie. So I wanted to bring that up to make you aware because, I mean, look, I'm sure that you aren't going over there to pick up a child. So
It does show here the peak time, violation time is at 8 a.m.
Yeah, I saw that.
wow. So, because school zones seem to be a huge problem when it comes to speeding. So this would probably be a question for Chief back there.
School's already
Hey.
started at 8 a.m. School has already started at 8 a.m., but the peak time is 8 a.m.
That's what it's showing here on the data results.
That's odd.
There are lots of parents who drop off late. I'm just saying.
Yes, ma'am,
But
it sure is.
yeah,
really
so that may be why they're speeding because they're rushing to get their child dropped off so they can get on to work. What are? Yeah, I see. Thank you.
Y'all, these recommendations did not take into account parents dropping off kids. Just for the study that we did and the numbers that we came up with.
There's
And
people
for
flying over
me,
that hill.
you know, whether you've got a three-way stop at Eleanor Walk and Thomas Dorsey or you don't, you're going to have issues with parents coming up Eleanor Walk and trying to get a break to get in line.
Right.
So,
But I guess the concern is that if you put a stop sign there, you've created the break, and now you
Yes,
opened
exactly.
it up.
well, you know, there used to be decent folks that would let you in every once in a while, you know?
It's dog eat
yeah.
dog world.
But it's a-
But that, you know.
Southern hospitality.
That's not why we recommended the 2 3-way stops.
Right.
Is for the speeding that's happening on that roadway. And
The
you
rest
know,
of the
I don't-
hours.
I don't know how to handle the backups with dropping off kids. I don't know how to handle that.
I understand, but it's where what I'm saying is that it could potentially cause an additional problem, create a problem down Eleanor Way that we don't currently have.
Eleanor Walk.
Eleanor Walk, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
But that's why we, you know, it's for the traffic study and the speeding is why we recommended. You know, if the ordinance doesn't, if the threshold's not broken to put speed humps over there, then we tried to do something to try to slow them down.
No, I understand that. And look, I appreciate what y'all are doing, so I don't mean it to sound like that at all.
But
I
like
just
you
worry
said-
about creating an additional problem that we don't currently have.
But Bobby or Harry, what you are talking, the study is for not just school hours, it's for all.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, 'cause like on Sunday morning, you know, it's nobody in school, but they go over there to hear just like
Yeah,
they're on the speedway.
We left the counter out, we always do for 7 full days to get weekend, school traffic, weekends and all that stuff. So that's what the study's based on.
Okay, moving right along.
I just have one thing. Is there any way it could be? No, I'm not even gonna suggest it. It's gonna be. It's gonna make it worse. I was gonna say right turn only between hours. like between these, you know, where they say the speed limit, just say it's a right turn only.
That's exactly what we were talking about earlier, and it kind of goes back to the officer as well. It's the challenge would be enforcement.
I don't know. Those parents might enforce it if you let them know. Like,
Car rider line justice.
all right. So, or have we decided? Is this going to be consent number 5? Is this consent number 5?
I would prefer a little more time to
Okay.
ask questions to staff. And again, please know that I appreciate what y'all have done.
I would say that the three-way stop to me is a good idea because it applies to the other 20-something hours during the day, which slow people down. It sounds like it's a different problem altogether when it comes to picking kids up, letting them out. But we don't want to negate the fact that the three-way stops do slow people down the rest of the time.
Okay, so this is not on consent. Thank you, Mr. Birch. Mr. Bain? Oh, no, Eric.
Good morning, Eric Bros, Wastewater Operations Manager. This is for the engineering service agreement. First, we submitted the waste load allocation. Now we are requesting for Paul Simonton to design and develop the environmental impact document, design development report, and the anti-degradation report. The waste load allocation will need to be provided prior to completion. However, beginning this process now will allow for both projects to move forward concurrently. Once we receive the waste load allocation, we will submit all reports, then start the process of the plant designs. The service agreement total amount comes to a total of $61,050.
Any questions for staff?
No, I would say it is a budgeted item, so that's a good thing.
Okay, so any problem with making this consent number 5?
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, Ms. DeSantos?
Good afternoon. I think I can say still good morning. Good morning. Diana DeSanto, interim city manager. Have 2 items for you to consider this afternoon. The first is actually a repeat from last year, and it was requested by the Arbors at Town Branch. And this essentially is a letter of support from GIC, which is the Georgia Initiative for Community Housing, as well as a city resolution of support for a project that they would like to do. Just for everyone listening at home, Arbor Valleys was actually awarded a similar project and has built Arbor Valley as a low-income housing tax credit project. They are currently there at the corner of Villa Rica Parkway and where Cleghorn and Anderson meet. And they are looking to, they are proposing to do a development, a senior housing development adjacent to on the other side of the parkway. They are asking specifically for a letter of support for 193 and 201 Cleghorn Street is the exact location. And this is for 64 units. And again, these would be senior. The current development that is out there is for family. So they did offer a different product. This was something that was presented before Mayor and Council last year and was supported. So this would go to the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. This isn't a city project, but because it goes through a competitive application process, having, number one, a community that's a GIC community like the city of Villa Rica is, and having GIC support for the project awards additional points to it, as well as having a resolution of support from the city. It also guides their development if it's not something that the city is interested in seeing. Obviously, they would come back with something different. A couple of changes that they've actually made, if you can go back to the one sheet that showed the design, I think initially, and perhaps even as late as last year, they presented a design where it had an entrance and or exit off of, I believe that's Myrtle Street. But we did meet with the developers there and talked about some concerns the community had and wanting to keep that road as a drive just for those residences. So they've actually come back, and this is very conceptual, obviously, but they did come back and find a way to make the entrance and exit off of Villa Rica Parkway.
Good.
Yes.
Only because I was thinking you have that nice quiet street and now you would be in an exit for the apartment complex.
Yes, and towards the back of the property, I believe they have a gazebo and then a green space plan. So it would be, it would keep the residential area intact and keep the residences. Again, these are proposed as senior residences, but it would keep them off on the Parkway connector. They've got it as 64 units. We've heard it as few as 57, but they still have 64 in the proposal. This has already been through planning and zoning and has already previously been approved and supported. So this is just another chance to go before DCA and try to get awarded a low-income housing tax credit project, which GIC is supportive of and want to make sure the city would be supportive of as well.
Questions from council?
No, I'm a little disappointed to see their display shows Mirror Lake Connector instead of Rica Parkway.
Though with the wording on the road, I'm
Oh,
sure
yeah.
they pulled it from
From an old
Mhm,
copy.
that's correct.
Okay.
Oh, the connector, yeah, that's what happens. They use whatever temporary name was assigned to it until it got its official Parkway name. If there's no other discussion, is there anyone opposed to making this consent item number 6? All right, that'll be C6. Discussion of residential rental dwelling unit inspection and maintenance program.
So this is just listed as discussion purposes. I've done a little bit of research based on some guidance received in terms of concern over residential rental dwelling units. So I'm going to read from the cover sheet, but this really is an opportunity to just be open dialogue and get a better understanding direction-wise of what mayor and council would like to see. But a purpose of a program like this is to create an ordinance within the building regulations in our standard code of ordinances that would provide for a residential rental dwelling unit inspection and maintenance program. And I actually took some of this information from another local city, and I've provided some backup ordinances that have similar programs in place. This one came from Forest Park, but was similar to some of the concerns that I've heard and want to see if council has a desire to address via ordinance. So currently there exists in the city some substandard and or perhaps unsanitary residential rental buildings and or dwelling units in which the physical conditions and characteristics could violate state or local building, housing, and sanitation code ordinances and render them unfit or unsafe for human occupancy and habitation. These residential rental buildings and units are detrimental to or could jeopardize the health, safety, and welfare of their occupants and of the public and serve to seriously compromise the integrity of residential quality of city neighborhoods. It has been observed by city staff performing code enforcement functions that in general the most egregious violations of health and safety codes and negative impacts because of such factors as deferred property maintenance, a proliferation of vehicles attributed to the tenants who rent properties, and or the accumulation of excess trash or debris on or about properties. It is further determined that the existence of such substandard residential rental buildings and or dwelling units necessitates disproportionate expenditures of public funds for code enforcement and remedial action, impairs the efficient and economic exercise of governmental powers and functions, and disrupts peaceful and quiet enjoyment of residential areas and neighborhoods. The city further finds and declares this desire to maintain and safeguard the stock of decent, safe, and sanitary rental housing units in the city through a partnership of owners, tenants, the city, and the community. The residential rental inspection program that would be created by a new ordinance is intended to address the conditions described in the findings and purpose of this section. The purpose of this section is to proactively identify such substandard and unsafe residential buildings and dwelling units and to ensure the rehabilitation or elimination of those buildings and dwelling units that do not meet minimum building code and housing code standards or are not safe to occupy or do not comply with zoning codes. It is intended that structures will be required to be maintained in a safe and sanitary condition at the level consistent with the codes of the period in which they were constructed. However, unpermitted additions and or alterations must comply with current codes adopted by the city. It is not the city's intent to intrude upon the fair and accepted contractual relationship between a tenant and or property owner. The city does not intend to intervene as an advocate of either party or to be receptive to the complaints of a tenant or property owner not specifically and clearly relevant to the provisions of this program. So I've attached with this cover sheet some ordinances and FAQs, again, Forest Park, Clarkston, and the city of Marietta were some examples that have residential maintenance and inspection programs. If that's something that this council has a desire to further pursue, some look at it just from a multi-family dwelling perspective. That's why I tried to say buildings and units. I wasn't too specific because I wasn't sure what the direction would be of this council. And then my prior experience with such a program, and this goes back probably to about 2014 or 2015, in which the city I was working for at the time was just having a lot of difficulty getting a hold of the property owner. Not necessarily the exact same thing, but definitely related to code violations and making sure that the owner was aware of the code violations in the property. And to just further highlight that movement at the state level, there is actually current legislation before I think it's in the House. Yes, sir. So this legislation authorizes local governments to create by ordinance or resolution a housing management database for residential rental properties. And again, this is still at the state level. This bill benefits local governments by enhancing their ability to enforce housing codes and maintain safety standards through a structured registration process for rental properties. It ensures that municipalities have access to accurate ownership and management information, improving accountability and streamlining compliance efforts. Additionally, by setting clear guidelines and limitations on the database requirements, it balances regulatory oversight with property owners' rights, reducing administrative burdens while still allowing local governments to address health and safety concerns effectively. So depending on where this legislation lands, there's currently, I think, another bill as well at the state level that if you own, I think it's 10 or more rental units within, and I believe it's a county.
Had to be contiguous?
Within a jurisdiction, I think it was 10 within a jurisdiction, a taxing jurisdiction, that you had to have someone in state as your registered property management owner. So at the state level, being able to get in touch with property owners is certainly being heard, and I think there's obviously 2 bills right now that are passing through to make sure that that information is collected. The challenge in taking that program a step further is trying to identify, because we do not assess and tax in-house, right? It's done through 2 different counties. So it would be, for us, the challenge is finding out who those individual owners are that don't reside, right? Because at that point in time, that's when it becomes a rental property.
So
I was going to say, let me pause because I've said a lot, and then we can kind of keep this discussion going.
So is this a citywide thing or just specific areas where this is supposed to apply?
No, this would be whatever council would like to see it become. It would be citywide. It would be in our code of ordinances as a subsection of our building standards in terms of a new program, but it would be citywide.
So this is not for owners, this is just for rental property.
This would be for residential rental units.
Yeah.
Correct.
Somebody, Joe Blow over yonder owns some property over here, and it's just going down, because he's not paying attention, or she not paying attention. This doesn't apply to people that's living there, that owns their property and is living in that property. This is rental property.
Correct, rental property. But to be clear, to create kind of this program and have a step further in terms of that database, everyone would, depending on how you create it, everyone would ultimately, who owns property that is then rented that for a residential purpose, so take commercial out of it, they would have to file for a permit, and then that would open the door to that annual inspection to where you can make sure the properties are maintained in a safe manner.
If you don't mind, only because I know I'm the instigator of this, but I also so appreciate your help on looking at these others. This is how this came about. We have rental properties within the city, and when you're a renter, you don't know what's behind the walls, right? You're not in charge of that or the roof or everything from caving in floors to tiles. And this is one of the most egregious that I saw back as a council member, is having a home that has these other issues, that also has windows that do not open and have children in the house. If a fire were to occur, they cannot even, they are jeopardizing life on even getting out. Some of the older mill houses, even you might talk about in Fullerville area in this, do not have, centralized heat and air conditioning. And so often they use space heaters, right? And you're in a little house space. And whether those inspections ever occur. But what I want to avoid is I want to protect property rights, but also not make this so onerous on staff to keep up with all of this that maybe we could put this is the understanding under a previous city manager, and staff could probably tell us if this is accurate based on code enforcement. Most of our issues with this type of housing tended to be with landlords who owned multiple properties. And having unsafe properties, families, children in them. We saw an example of a recent one with a fire that occurred. They just don't even have the simplest of things of the way we would build a house now. So the safety factor is the biggest one. The other that you brought up that's helpful to know what rental property is, we now have not only owners that are out of state when it deals with code enforcement, we have foreign owners of property that are out of country. So I noticed that on one of them, Marietta's required a local agent, that you had to have a local agent. So when something happens with the city, couldn't afford, there's some other problem, they can get in touch with somebody. But on the ground, the very basic thing that got all this started was safety factors with people that are renters that aren't in control of the wiring or anything else, and what we could do so that there was some sort of inspection process that it wouldn't be every year. I don't know exactly how to set that up, just so it's not onerous on staff and so it still protects the property rights of the owner.
I will say this, the only concern that I would have about, and again, even the bill, one of the bills at the state level, I think was what we talked about, having 10 within a jurisdiction, you had to have a local property manager. The challenge would be, it's just so easy to put a property in a different name. I think that would probably be potentially a workaround if you owned 9, but the program was or if you owned 11, but the program was for 10, I'll just put, 2 other houses in this trust name or this LLC's name. That's one potential workaround. The only other, this would include additional staff. This isn't a program that we could just take on with the staff that we have right now. Again, it would be a guess, but taking multifamily out and just looking at the number of single-family homes that are rental units in the city, that would be more than any one housing inspector that's currently, with the workload that we have right now, with new developments coming on. And then for even the additional permitting would probably be another half person. So I just kind of wanted to get a feel for where everyone stood, knowing, okay, safety's of the utmost importance, the administrative burden obviously kind of down here, and what in the middle, right, is a type of program that you guys would like to see, because I do think taking it to the level of permitting and annual inspections would be more staff. And because we don't collect the data in-house, I just don't know how effective we could be at running a program like this without additional
Why
staff.
would we do annual, though? Why would it be necessary to inspect annually? Because that does seem like it'd be onerous.
You could maybe tier it to every 2 years. You could do single family 1 year, multifamily the next year. I mean, it's just there's a lot of properties. I mean, even if you did it every 3 years and you just went through like a housing code checklist, if you're talking multifamily and single family, I mean, that probably is years of work for just one inspector. So if it was every 2 years or 3 years, I mean,
so
we
have
could.
you gotten any feedback from code enforcement, although I know often that's more of the exterior that they tend to notice? I mean, if windows are screwed shut, that's what was in that one rental house, the windows were screwed shut.
So I know one of the
one that caught fire.
Code enforcement personnel has worked in Florida under a similar type permitting program, whether it was a subset of their occupational tax or a different permitting process. That was kind of a platform they were familiar with. But the programs that I've seen in Georgia are run more from a housing inspector standpoint, not code enforcement. Code enforcement would be kind of the after effect. One thing I will say, and I need to follow up with Clarkston because they were one of the examples, and I do believe, I don't want to misspeak, but I think they are or have been a GIC community in the past, so would be interested to see how it's impacted affordability, because we just want to make sure that what we're doing doesn't put, obviously, again, safety is up here, but we don't want to put such standards on housing that housing prices have now gone up here as well, because owners they're not gonna eat the cost, they're gonna pass that cost on to the tenant.
So I have a couple questions. I guess when you're talking about building up the database, I mean, between the counties, Q Public, and the Georgia Secretary of State, I mean, I think you could probably get a pretty good, I mean, that's usually what I do if I'm looking at a property owner. I'm usually Q Public, get the address. If it's an LLC, then I'll go check the LLC out on the Secretary of State's website, and I'm usually sending a letter to the owner's address as well as the registered agent for the LLC. I mean, so go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I don't have enough experience in finance here. In my prior cities, one thing they do really good is they would send like an extra Excel sheet when we get the digest data and importing it. And again, it's a little bit easier when you bill your own taxes because you know what's homestead and not homestead.
Right.
Otherwise, you're relying on other people's data.
Right. Okay.
So there's that challenge. It's not our data, it's someone else's data. Yes, you can look for that factor, the homestead versus non-homestead, but I mean, you're looking at potentially 150, 200 like changes in ownership a year. That's what
I
I've
know
been.
a lot of, especially new homeowners, don't realize they need to file for their homestead, so they don't file for it. I try to inform my constituents of that all the time. So I know that's informative, but probably not an indicator necessarily. But I just, I didn't know if we got an intern or something to start kind of compiling the data, like a summer college intern or something, and start we can build that up ourselves, just, spend all day going to Q Public and cross-referencing and creating a spreadsheet. But beyond that, I guess, and this is another experience I had. So I represented a client who purchased a property in Villa Rica that was a tax sale property. And it was probably 10 or 15 years ago when the property actually was on the tax sale. And at that time, it appeared that Villa Rica was taking basically fines from either the water department because of past due water or from housing code violations, and then assessing them as taxes. And the majority of the past due taxes that this person owned, that he purchased it from at tax sale, basically the tax FIFA defendant, was because of housing code violations and or water bills. Is that?
I mean, if they go through the judicial process, they have the right to do that and try to file that way.
Yeah, I just didn't know if our current ordinance provided for that. If there's a housing code violation and there's a fines, does that then convert to taxes in some way? I would have to go back and pull that file. But
you can convert fines to a money judgment and collect it.
So maybe that's what happened in this case.
Same as you would a tax.
So maybe I guess municipal court converted it over to a money judgment and assessed it as taxes.
That's been my experience.
Okay, all right.
So is this something that you planning on doing, or if it's okay? So, because my question is, are you gonna share this with the public?
Are you talking about the program?
This program, yes. I mean, to let them know, because you know how that is. They're gonna get it and they're gonna think it's for us and not for, I don't mean no particular people, but I mean people that own their home, they're thinking this, and you're saying this is only for rental property.
That's correct.
So if people own their home, it has nothing to do with them.
Correct.
But just people that rent some. I'm trying to get it straight, because
No,
I
I
know
know.
we're going to be asked these questions.
Yeah,
so
and-
I'm trying to get it straight in my mind.
One of the things that Forest Park did a really good job of is kind of creating an FAQ for their program, right? Not suggesting that we adopt their program, but for their program, they did a really good kind of FAQ. This is why, this is what it's for, this is who's impacted by it, what to expect upon inspection. It kind of goes through a lot of detail and things. We could certainly, that would be much later down the line. This is really just to get a feel for how council, would like to address this issue. If they feel like, creating this new program, creating an ordinance is of value, if safety is, certainly again, a high concern, that we need to take another step outside of just code enforcement to say, okay, we're going to address housing standards, and this is how we're going to unilaterally do it, and kind of draw that line in the sand. And whether it's just multifamily, if you want to kind of start there and build the program from there, or if it's something that any, rental dwelling unit, I'm kind of just getting a feeler out there for where council's at.
So,
Wouldn't it? Oh, go
I
ahead.
got one more question.
Yeah.
And it may be repetitious, but say Matthew owns some property and it's going down. Now, I mean, his rental property. Okay, so I own my house. It needs some work, real bad. So this doesn't apply to me, but it applies to Matthew and his group of houses.
That's correct.
Right.
Okay.
And it would only apply depending on the circumstance, because people can allow their property to get run down to a degree. We're talking about more serious issues here, I believe, because these tenants are not in charge of the safety of what's behind the walls, the frayed wiring, or what all might exist. Could we not, GMA, and I know with us being in the Georgia Initiative for Housing, GIC, the GIC program, there's got to be some, aside from this, we could probably even get some feedback when we have that conference this spring from other cities that have addressed this and and I would imagine that one of our contacts on GMA could maybe assist us in, well, this is feasible, this isn't very feasible, this is costly, this isn't costly, to try to keep it as uncomplicated as possible. Do you know what I mean? Like, not over-regulated, and yet in some sort of way providing some safety. I don't know what everybody's seen in their wards. Ward 3 had a lot of this. Ward 4, maybe not. A lot of newer housing there. But it was prevalent. And still is. Now it's another ward with the lines being drawn. You'll see some of this on Candler and those type of places.
No, those are excellent resources. At the fall GIC retreat, there was some conversation about, standards of housing and how code enforcement works with the committee. And we've since we come back, we had code enforcement pay a visit to our committee and kind of explain some of the things that they've seen, and like heartbreaking living conditions. But at the same time, it's such a balance, because the minute you shut that down, you've created another problem. So we talked earlier about like unintended consequences in terms of like three-way stop, and I'm not trying to make a comparison, but one of the things that they just said, there's a balance, and certainly GIC and with housing affordability being their lens that they're looking through, is when you do institute programs like this, just to make sure that it isn't so regulated or so strict that you're taking away that different option of housing stock for people.
Well, and that's when I've looked at a few, even where we tried to assist the people that were in it to some degree with even helping clean up as citizens. Our biggest concern was there's children in there and the windows don't open and those type of things. But I get the overregulation if you make it costly, but at the same time, are we going to wait till people are dead and children are dead in a house that the wiring was bad and the windows were screwed shut? I don't want it to get to that either. But anyway, let's.
But renters have rights, and renters can report those type of safety issues, correct?
They can. It can create an uncomfortable situation for them, and that kind of lends itself to, and maybe perhaps it's an opportunity where code enforcement and perhaps more in a workshop setting can kind of come share with you their stories. It's just that double-edged sword. If they report, there could be retaliation from their landlord, and there's really nothing that code enforcement can do to necessarily stop that other than to make sure that just those life safety items are being addressed.
So if I can just, in landlord tenant law, there is a provision where a tenant could basically say, I'm going to pay for these improvements that have to be done that you've neglected to do, landlord. But you have to give the landlord, I cannot remember off the top of my head, so many days notice that you're going to do it, and then you have to front those costs, and then you have to give additional notice because your remedy then is to reduce your rent. And so oftentimes if you don't have, it's a great idea, but it's kind of impractical for most landlords, at least, client or tenants, at least clients that come to me about it, because it's just, it causes a lot of money up front that they may not have. If you're, even if you're a tenant in a market rate place, a market rate home, especially if you're a low income. So that's kind of the tough catch-22 of that statute.
I think legally it's a difficult issue also,
Mhm.
getting inside the house. We're talking about wiring and window shut, so you actually have to be inside the house to observe those items. And once we issue a CO, we give someone permission to turn that building into a home, then you've got Fourth Amendment rights. And if you look at these ordinances, they talk about voluntary inspections because they can slam the door on us, and we have to have probable cause to go into that house. We have to have probable cause that a crime is being committed in that house, which could be a codes violation. But it's not an easy. Legally, it's not an easy thing to do. We can drive by properties, and if there's trash piled up and a bunch of abandoned cars, that's easy. We can see it.
Yeah, that's regular code enforcement.
Getting inside that house, unless they're making an improvement or something else that would require them to get permission from the city to do something, it's a difficult thing to police.
So how do these cities do their?
Well, if you read the ordinances, they're voluntary. They're voluntary inspections or self-inspections. And if they shut the door on you, then you have to have enough evidence to go before a judge and get a court order to go inside that property.
I must have I did not read every line, I have to admit, but it was talking about like certified inspector or so. But, okay.
So, another question. Say I'm renting this house. Now, I'm renting it, but say maybe it was my parents' house and it was still in their name, but not in my name. So that's a sticky question, I know, but how would you do that? It's my parents' house, but it's in their name, but I'm renting it. I'm in it.
If there was no provision in terms of like the total number of units and it was, single family and multifamily, it would not be treated any differently.
Yeah.
And that is very sticky.
Yeah, so it would still be considered a landlord owned the house because it's still in their name.
Yeah.
And then
if the program again, and I'm picking on Forest Park because it felt most similar to kind of what I'd heard would be a possible solution to get the inspection piece done. And they issue a business license, not necessarily a CO. They treat essentially the residential rental property market as a business. And that, again, about 10 years ago was a task the city that I was working for at the time was looking at something similar, different reasons. It wasn't just for safety. It was when there were code issues that neighbors were wanting to report. We did not have a way to get in touch with the property owner to let them know that there were code issues. I do think at the state level, it sounds like we are making progress 10 years later towards that, because I think that issue is impacting a lot of communities. That was kind of coming out of the recession when we were really starting to see a lot of different type of property owners and kind of working through different renter landlord challenges, especially when they're foreign to our country. Again, trying to be able to find who that owner is. So I've thrown like a big hodgepodge, I guess, direction wise. What I'm looking for back is, are we looking for a program that's like a program where, whether it's voluntary or a requirement, is it permitted business license, or is it something more along the lines of just understanding what our rental stock looks like and kind of reassessing and coming back from there? Or?
Well, I got one more question. It's a little tricky question, but okay, say on that line what I was talking about. My parents own that house, and now I'm staying in. But the parents are dead, so where you go? Where would you go with that? But I'm in that house. It's still in my parents' name.
Probate.
Yes.
But they
Probated your parents' estate.
Okay. All right. So you got to go through probate, spend that money. Okay.
Call the Momptahan Law Firm and we'll help you probate your parents' estate. Shameless plug.
Have we run into, not necessarily the safety issue, have we run, and this may even involve like a VRPD, where we have people doing illegal stuff out of a rental house and nobody knows how to track down the owner? That's just a side, it's not necessarily the safety I was talking about, as far as renters being in an unhealthy house. It has black mold or whatever. They don't know why they have the kids sick, because they don't know there's black mold in there or whatever. Do we have some issues with that, with ownership, where we have chronic things going on, but we can't find who owns the house?
And while he's coming up, I got a question for Kevin. If the renter complains, would that give us any ability to go in the house? And
Sure. The renter would be the person that allows us to enter in the property. So
the renter herself would be the one that allows in.
Yeah.
If he has a problem with something going on in the
I
house,
think we can treat the landlord like a business, but the person that's actually renting the property, that's their home. They don't have to let us in.
And they old. And
but the renter, if he has a problem, he would want us to come in and confront the problem and get it fixed, so.
But some of those older people that's renting this house, they scared to let people in that house in the first place. You go there and you tell them come to do. It's just a normal thing that people are scared to let people in their house. I'm not saying they should do it, but the older people, you stepping up there talking about you want to come in there and inspect their house, and they already know they're having a problem, so they probably won't let you in.
You're talking about an owner or a renter?
The renter.
Okay. Yeah, well,
Because they don't want the
people need
retribution
to
or
naturally be a
retaliation.
little protective.
Because that landlord might put me out.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a lot to consider.
It's true, there's been retaliation at times if the person complains.
Michael Mansell, Villa Rica Police Chief. The question was, do we have places that we get complaints about and we have a tough time locating ownership? We have had that issue. It's not something that happens weekly or monthly, but it has happened, especially up on East Wilson, where you have so many different people that owns those properties. They're not owned by one big company. They're so many different ownerships that it's very difficult to locate the people that own them, because usually they're corporations and they're not from around here. But we have had that happen, but it's not something that happens regularly.
Okay, thank you.
If I can
Also, if I can mention, the Fentanyl Summit is Thursday. If anybody wants to go, it's a really good event if anybody wants to go to that. Thank you.
Down in Carrollton at City Station. It's that City Station, isn't it? I think so.
If I can mention one thing also,
City Station.
Joel's saying yes.
Oh, okay.
It's at City Station. Is that correct? The Fentanyl Summit is at City Station?
Yeah, Joel
on
said.
Thursday.
Joel said yes.
9 a.m. to 3 p.m. I'll make sure I have no more questions for
And what is the fentanyl summit gonna do for you? I mean,
was like a-
what, did they just discuss about the fentanyl problem? What?
Well, they have a lot of different things. They have the coroner that speaks and talks about how many deaths we've had in Carroll County attributed to fentanyl, and it averages between 25 and 30 a year. But we also have people that will speak about treatment. We'll have people that tell their story about addiction and how they've thankfully been able to get off of drugs and things like that. It's a really good event.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're fine.
So if I could, I'm sorry, if I could add, also, we talked about, and I think in some of those House bills, there's a minimum ownership threshold of 5 or 10. So there's actually already an existing landlord-tenant law, there's also already heightened requirements for owners that own more than 10 units, and that's if they own it by family member, son, child, daughter, et cetera, to kind of help avoid that. So I think there's already some kind of statutes and case law out there that kind of address this idea of like what the ownerships are and all that.
The current bill at the state level, the one that creates basically that housing management database for residential
I think
rental
it's just
properties, that's 5 dwelling
Yeah.
units. And the other bill that's concurrent, different bill, has to do with 10 dwelling units.
Right, yeah, so there's a separate and apart from that, currently in the landlord-tenant statute, if you own a, thanks for my fentanyl invite. If your property is owned by an LLC or an individual, or your family owns 10 or more, then you have the heightened requirements for like security deposits and where you deposit those and other certain things. And I think that's the origin for a lot of the requirements from those bills too, is that if we already had these heightened requirements for landlords, then we could just parlay those into those bills. And I think it's something that we should probably explore in whatever we do, because then you're not like in the scenario that Ms. Shirley referenced, where it's just basically the tenant per se is just a family member of a family and they're just living in that house. More than likely, that family member or that family doesn't have 10 units where they have family members residing, and therefore they wouldn't be subject to these requirements. So I think that's what I'm trying to get to, basically.
So you would like to see something where it's either we started with multifamily or started with an owner of 5 or 10 or more properties.
Correct, right, yeah. That way because again, the majority of those persons that own 5 or 10 or less are going to be the scenarios where Ms. Shirley described, where it's going to be, family member residing in another family member's home kind of situation.
Okay.
And then if we get to the question of whether or not, well, how do we interpret whether they own it? That's what I'm saying. There's existing statutes out there that already have a similar definition, and we would just follow however they determine it.
It's not ownership for me, it's just
Yeah.
the question of, are we addressing safety?
Right, but I think it's where you get the balance between being kind of invasive into just family members versus the business operating, right? Like, if Miss Shirley's residing in her parents' home, she's probably, may or may not be paying rent. That's not really a business relationship. It's not really a contractual relationship. But if it's, some LLC based out of Arizona, and they've got 10 or more units, then that's different.
Councilman Warman.
This feels like a lot of government involvement.
Right.
I would rather create a safe place somehow or another for renters to be able to report the issues. And then when those issues come up, then we can get involved. But I feel like this whole conversation is too much government involvement. I mean, and listen, if somebody has their windows nailed shut, that's not okay. But I also don't think that a government entity needs to just go into someone's home without being asked to do so. Drugs, totally different situation. But when we're talking about code violations, I don't know how I feel about us getting involved in that.
That's why we're having this discussion. Yeah.
It seems like,
Councilman McCoy.
thank you. It seems like that, obviously, the safety, when you hear about people's safety, it obviously tugs at your heartstrings, and if you have children, you see that child in that house and looking out the window while they die. But anyway, I always go to a worst case scenario. So anyway, with that being said though, but at the same time that we talk about landlord retaliation, they could be without a home a week later.
Yes.
They're on the street.
Yes.
And I mean, while they're not dead, it's not good to be homeless, and it's not good that if you're already in a low income situation, having to scramble for a home for a week or a month or however long it takes. So it seems like there is a lot of consequences, maybe is the right word. And also too, the other thing is there seems like a ton of loopholes. There's a bunch of loopholes, like you create another LLC, you put it in a family, put it in your kid's name, put it in your parents' name, and stuff like that. So it seems like it would be very hard to enforce. So what Councilman Warmoth was saying is that maybe, I hate to say like a call line or what's those things called? But something, if it is up to the person living in there, whether it is inspected or not, to give them some kind of space to report that. Like, hey, my windows are nailed shut. Can you come look at this? This wire is sticking out my wall. Can you come look at this? Or something like that. That seems like a more efficient way of dealing with this than creating something that's a whole bunch of loopholes for people to get through and leaving people homeless.
If I may, I don't disagree necessarily with that sentiment at all. I mean, I'm totally, I don't want the government invading into, my home or any of my properties or whatever. I think the issue is that we essentially have a self-reporting system now, and nobody is self-reporting, and that could be because they don't have. Maybe it's because they don't have the resources or whatever, but so I do think a more proactive approach. I don't necessarily want to go into, I don't know if we need to do annual inspections or even inspections at all. I'm just concerned that the self-reporting system we have now is not getting results because because essentially you're leaving it, the way the current system is, you're essentially leaving it up to a tenant that has little to no resources to enforce, code violations. And so, sure, you're gonna get, regardless of the kind of situation, even in the current system, there could be retaliation to that landlord. We're just going to evict you now. We're going to find some reason to evict you, and then we're gonna. If you look at a landlord-tenant lease, there's all kinds of technicalities that they can find to evict somebody, and then go through that process. So that could be used as a retaliation or retribution, and there's not necessarily a remedy for that. But I think what I'm saying is that, but if you do permit a governing authority to have a little bit of a tool, basically, to say, well, you can't continuously rent out this property without bringing it up to some basic standards. And I think that's kind of where I'm, and I know the legislation is, there's a database and they have to register it, and I think the idea is that it's going to have some basic, you're going to have some basic guardrails on what the livability of a home is. So you're right. And I think that's what Kevin was talking about. Like at some level, sure, we can get a complaint. Okay, the windows are nailed shut. Can a code enforcement see that from the outside? Yes. But if that code enforcement officer then knocks on the door, the tenant can say, I don't want you in here. And so all that can be addressed, all that can be addressed, and that's a Fourth Amendment violation to walk in there. All that can be addressed is what's, in plain sight. But if that tenant says, yeah, my kids have been sick, come on in, well, they've opened the door to that, and that tenant may not have the resources to pursue anything against the landlord. And now the landlord, if it goes through the process, municipal court process and all that, now there might be a process where they have to do some basic livability remedy in order to be able to be eligible to re-rent that property again. I mean, so anyway, that's just where I'm at, but there's a lot of differing opinions up here. I think that's why we're talking about it, right? So
I have a compromise that I think might work. What if I were to take this back to what I would otherwise call like committee level? And right now, I mean, GIC kind of is the housing committee on behalf of council. I mean, it's not necessarily appointed. We're all volunteers and working to make more affordability options in the city, but they have a community meeting. This is my plug. They have a community meeting this Thursday at 6 p.m. at the library, and the intent is just to hear from community members about how to address affordability. That's the intent of that community meeting. However, I can take it back to committee and we can have another community meeting at a different point and kind of hear from people who might be impacted by a program like this, the good, the bad, the ugly, and we can at least have a little bit more information that we could then bring back.
well, can I also say, Mayor, do we still have that you have a standing committee on housing? Or was that the one that was adjusted? I don't recall.
It's kind of related to the Housing Authority.
Okay,
That's kind of been its narrow focus.
Okay.
I mean, maybe we could change it. That's what it's always been since I came on council, so I didn't make
Okay.
up those particular committees. I fell
Right.
into them.
Sure, okay.
You know?
I was just thinking, I mean, that could be a kind of a workshop place. That committee could also be a workshop place.
That's how
for
you
this.
vet things. I mean, they
Yeah.
do the same thing with legislation at the state level, is, well, what about this? Well, maybe and you put heads together and people, and you kind of flesh it out to try to come out with what either shut it down completely, or, hey, no, that part isn't a good idea, this part is, and so that's how you vet things. Yes.
It's simple. How many people have been harmed or injured due to these landlords in the say Carroll County? What are the statistics on that? How many people have had injury or harm or worse due to this in say Carroll County?
Yeah, nobody's
I don't even know that we would have that. I don't even know that we would have that data. A statistic that I could give you, I don't have it before me today, would be, how many calls we get from tenants, to report items inside of, the dwelling unit. I could get you that statistic. But in terms of harm, I don't even know that they would report that to us, unfortunately.
Okay.
Do you have a large number of calls reporting issues within rentals? I would like to see the numbers.
It would be, that would be a difficult number because of what the complaint was, because who are they calling? Are they calling City Hall? Are they calling 911? Are they calling the local police department? I think that would be a tough one to gather.
Or customer service.
One thing that I thought of is magistrate court is over like rental as far as somebody being evicted or things like that. Is that a possible remedy for this, where we talk to our magistrate judge, our new magistrate judge, and find out if that's something that people can complain to them and they can be involved in the process? Because it's really not a police issue. And like Ms. Marshman said, folks aren't going to just want to let people come in and look at their house and inspect their house if they don't know who they are. You're going into people's houses, and it's just one of those that I don't know that it's a great thing for our codes, or for, obviously not for law enforcement to do, but maybe we can come up with a remedy through magistrate court. Mr. Drummond?
I think that's a possibility. We also have a nuisance statute, and it's pretty much the same nuisance statute that most cities have. And and this would really go toward what we would call a slumlord. Mm-hmm. You got properties that really aren't safe for habitation, rodent infested. But we've used that statute in other jurisdictions. Franklin used it in the last year. There was a trailer park there that was just, no one should live there. And most of those complaints originated actually at the schools with defects. The kids were coming to school just horrible, unbathed, no food, no water, no running water in the properties you drive by, no trash collection. So truly a slumlord situation. And we were able to ultimately, the city ends up owning that property before it's over with. But even in that horrible situation, there were tenants that didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, we were out there with a bulldozer and had to find family to get someone out of one of those units that had no roof on it. And the tenant did not want to leave. So it's a difficult situation.
But that takes you down to the same situation unless the rental person opens the door and says, come on in, you can't go in. So I don't see how you inspect that thing unless they let you in.
It's a difficult situation.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's the only place people, that's the only thing they can afford. They don't have anywhere else to go, so they just not gonna get out because you say get out. You know, it has to be, it's just a sad situation, really.
I kind of like the city manager's suggestion because we're not going to solve this today for sure. We need to do a little more research and you got to take it somewhere and do it.
Okay.
And that's our last item.
That's it.
So unless, we're good, we're done. Oh, yes, we need to go over our consent agenda. Alrighty, I'll read it off, and if you have anything different or I miss anything, let me know. Okay, consent item number 1 is the intergovernmental agreement with Douglas County and their tax commissioner. Consent item number 2 is the intergovernmental agreement with Douglas County. Number 3 is the Fairway plat, B1, final plat. Item 4 is the July 3rd fireworks. Item 5 is the engineering services agreement. And 6, the resolution and letter of support for the senior housing development. Anyone see anything else? Okay. All right, we're done.